What's for dinner? Where are my socks? How do you make Jell-O? What time do the kids need to be at school? When is my dad's birthday? How many of these questions sound familiar? And in general, who gets these types of questions? Moms, that's right. And we laugh because it resonates, except sometimes it isn't funny. Mother's Day is really complicated, isn't it? As we heard in our opening words and in our joys and sorrows, we have many different experiences of Mother's Day. Some of us have a wonderful relationship with our moms or with being a mom, and that is fantastic, and that is absolutely worth celebrating. For others of us, it may be less straightforward. Mother's Day may raise complicated feelings about our own mothers and our relationship to them. Some of us may be grieving the loss of our mother or the loss of the mother we wish we had had. Some of us love being mothers. Some of us don't. Some of us desperately want to be mothers but can't. Some of us will never raise children, but we feel we mother, nurture in so many other ways that are often overlooked. Today's understanding of Mother's Day is actually very different than how it was originally conceived. The origins of Mother's Day, as celebrated in the United States, date back to the 19th century. In 1868, Anne Reeves Jarvis of West Virginia organized Mother's Friendship Day, at which mothers gathered with former Union and Confederate soldiers to promote reconciliation. And in 1870, Unitarian abolitionist Julia Ward Howe wrote the Mother's Day Proclamation, a call to action that asked mothers to unite in promoting world peace. Today's official version of Mother's Day arose in the early 1900s as the result of the efforts of Anna Jarvis, the daughter of Anne Reeves Jarvis. Following her mother's death, Anna Jarvis conceived of Mother's Day as a way to honor the sacrifices that mothers make for their children. Following the success of her first Mother's Day, Jarvis, who remained unmarried and child-free her whole life, resolved to see the holiday added to the national calendar. Arguing that American holidays were biased toward male achievement, she started a massive letter-writing campaign to newspapers and prominent politicians, urging the adoption of a special day honoring motherhood. And it was adopted. But by 1920, she had become disgusted with how the holiday had been commercialized. She outwardly denounced the transformation and urged people to stop buying Mother's Day cards and flowers and candies. And by the time of her death in 1948, she had disowned the holiday altogether and even lobbied the government to see it removed from the calendar. Obviously, that didn't work. I think it's important to remember that Mother's Day has its roots in anti-oppression work. Because today I want to talk about a common relationship dynamic that comes out of patriarchy and white supremacy culture. I know, right? Reverend Dawn sure does pick easy services to talk about. But church is, as James Luther Adams suggested, a place where we go to practice being human. So it is fitting to talk about dynamics present in many human relationships. And this topic is one that is part of the cultural and social zeitgeist of the moment. This relationship dynamic is often overlooked and is accepted as normal, even though it can harm everyone in the relationship. A dynamic that was captured by indie musician Paris Paloma when she released her song Labor in March of last year. It blew up on TikTok even before it was released. The song received 1 million streams on Spotify within the first 24 hours. and today has more than 24 million views on YouTube. And that doesn't count how many people forwarded it or used it in their own posts. The song started a viral trend in which women began posting videos using the lyrics of the bridge, which are this: all day, every day, therapist, mother, maid, nymph, then a virgin, nurse, then a servant, just an appendage, live to attend him so that he never lifts a finger. 24/7 baby machine so he can live out his picket fence dream. It's not an act of love if you make her, you make me do too much labor. Very powerful. And last month, Paloma released a cacophony version of the song that uses clips of some of the women who stitched it with her, singing along with her. If you haven't seen it, I suggest Googling it. Paloma says that the song is a metaphor for the domestic paradise that so many men enjoy and women build and curate for their husbands and relationships. The women, many mothers, who this song resonates with feel a deep sorrow and rage at being forced into gender roles, forced to carry the majority of the mental load and do the majority of the emotional labor for their families. Okay, let me unpack that. Though Paloma's song is specifically about women and the boxes that women are put into and the expectations placed upon them, and while this dynamic does disproportionately impact women in heterosexual relationships, I want to expand it outward because anyone can be in a nurturing role. As we heard in our Words for All Ages, moms can be any gender. That means that this unbalanced dynamic can happen in any relationship or family, no matter the number of people involved or their gender. Okay, so what is mental load? Mental load is the cognitive effort involved in managing a relationship, a household, a job, a life. For example, when figuring out what's for dinner, the mental load involves knowing everyone's schedule in the household, who will eat what, who is allergic to what ingredients are already in the house, what needs to be picked up at the grocery store, when that grocery store run fits into someone's schedule, what pots or pans need to be cleaned in order to make dinner. The mental load of knowing what's for dinner is much heavier than just picking out some food and cooking it. Emotional labor is a type of mental load where a person regulates their emotional responses to put others at ease. It can look like smiling and being cheerful, hugging your kids even when you've had a bad day. It can mean choosing not to say something directly, but to soften it with qualifiers, with apologies for your tone. The difference between saying, I think we might want to consider doing this, rather than, we need to do this. It can mean managing relationships, like when one partner is the go-to person for everyone's birthdays and anniversaries, something called kin keeping that was written about in the New York Times earlier this week. Now, neither mental load nor emotional labor are inherently bad things. Those of us who are nurturers often do these things with love. It's part of being connected with people and being in relationship with people. But when only one person is handling the vast majority of the mental load or the emotional labor of a relationship or family, or when it becomes expected or taken for granted, the dynamic becomes unbalanced. This can lead to burnout, exhaustion, and other mental health conditions for the person in the nurturing role. Now, while the person carrying the majority of the mental load and doing most of the emotional labor in a family can be any gender, because of patriarchy and white supremacy culture, this dynamic does disproportionately impact women, which is why Paloma's song struck such a chord. Now let me unpack that just a little bit for you. Patriarchy is a social system in which positions of dominance and privilege are held by men. One of the ways that the patriarchy functions is that men benefit from the free labor of others, such as the invisible labor of home and household management. Women in particular have been incentivized, socialized from a very young age to carry the mental load and do the emotional labor in their families. In her book called Emotional Labor, Rose Hackman says that women are expected to be other-oriented as a gender. If we are not other-oriented, we are corrected, we are policed, she says, not just by our own parents, jobs, or family units, but also out in the world. A woman who is seen as ambitious is seen as a threat, as aggressive. Women are praised and valued for having caring attributes in families and in the workplace. The old adage was that women were just better at caring, but that's because of patriarchy. Neuroscientific research and psychological research show that men are just as able to be good at emotional labor and carrying the mental load as women. It's just that men don't often have the same cultural pressure put on them to do so. Now, this dynamic hits Black, Indigenous, and people of color much harder than it does white people. When a Black woman outwardly expresses anger, she risks being experienced as aggressive, belligerent, contentious, or angry. Patriarchy and white supremacy culture says she should prioritize other people's feelings and not express her own, maybe especially not to express her own, even if her own feelings are justified. Hispanic and Latino women are often experienced as verbally aggressive, hot-headed, and lacking work ethic. All of this creates a racial dynamic where people of color are required to maintain the comfort of white people, to put the comfort of white people ahead of their own. A stark example of this happened just recently. Actor and TV show host Drew Barrymore had Vice President Harris on her show. Drew broke down into tears and basically asked the vice president to become the nation's mom and take care of us. It's tough to imagine a scenario where former Vice Presidents Pence or Biden or Cheney would have been asked to be the daddy of our country. Though honestly, I can see someone asking that of Al Gore. Can't you? But anyway, because Vice President Harris is a woman of color, this request also had racial undertones reflective of the mammy archetype, in which African American women are the supporting characters to white protagonists, because Black women are supposed to be good takers, caretakers, nurturers, selfless, strong, and supportive. There's a meme I saw recently. It was a cartoon with two panels. In the first panel, there's a man holding up a bag of fast food coming through the doorway of a house. The caption says, "Great dad!" The second panel was exactly the same, except it was a woman, and the caption read, "Terrible mom!" Both the mom and the dad in this cartoon were white, but if they had been Black or Indigenous or people of color moms, one can imagine the adjectives other than terrible that would have been used. This is one way that the dynamic of an unbalanced, taken for granted mental load and emotional labor is a part of white supremacy culture. Truly, beloveds, this is a justice issue. It is a culturally ingrained and accepted oppression that holds moms, particularly BIPOC moms, to a different standard. So what does this combination of unbalanced mental load and emotional labor look like in many families? No matter your gender, if you are carrying an unbalanced mental load for your family, it can look like being the person who miraculously knows where everything in the house is. The one who changes the empty toilet paper roll, even though the new rolls are right there. It can look like being the one who handles all the finances, because if not, they don't get done on time. Or being the one who walks the kids through the college application process. or the one who makes the list of things for your partner to do and has to list obvious things like change the light bulb that has been out for 3 weeks. For a friend of mine, this looked like every time she would take a business trip, she would create a long list of everything that her spouse needed to take care of while she was gone. What the morning routine for the kids was, what kind of lunch to pack, what time they needed to be at school, a detailed itinerary of doctor's appointments or teachers' meetings with pickup times, school addresses because her partner didn't know or would forget. She would leave meals prepped for trips of more than one night because otherwise they would subsist solely on fast food. She included the times the dog needed to be walked and that her partner should scoop the kitty litter daily. She learned she had to do this because otherwise the kids would go to school without lunches, still in their pajamas, which can be fine, but consistently missing doctor's appointments and teachers' meetings, or taking the kids to the wrong school, or having her come home to dog urine all over the carpet is not fine. Another example, I've heard stories of people who carry the majority of the mental load and doing the majority of the emotional labor who, while still in the hospital after surgery, were asked by their partner, "What's the plan for dinner tonight?" Or of one person who, after coming home from a stay in the hospital, commented that the bathroom needed cleaning, and their partner reassured them that it can wait until you feel better. I know someone for whom this meant they planned all the family vacations, including a checklist of what to pack, not just for the children, but for their spouse. They made the travel arrangements, planned the activities, meals, where to stay, and to save money, they would cook most of the meals while on vacation, which to me doesn't seem like that much of a vacation. And one of you recently shared with me that this unbalanced dynamic looks like your spouse asking you what you want to do on your birthday, and when you say, "Surprise me, anything is fine, I just don't want to have to make the plans," nothing happens. And that, beloveds, is heartbreaking and demoralizing and isolating. It is not surprising that after World War II, when moms were told to leave the factories and go back to the home, told to make their whole lives about taking care of their families, they suffered. They were told that their whole reason for existing was the care of others, and it was taken for granted that this is what moms were supposed to do and supposed to want. And many struggled with depression, with overwhelm, with lack of purpose and meaning. Alcoholism among women began to rise, as did the use of Mother's Little Helper, Valium. Advertisements for Valium in the 60s and 70s depicted a woman who might be saved from her disappointing life by popping pills. It was touted as a drug that would sweep away your depression and anxiety, addressing the symptom rather than the disease. Whew. I know, this is a lot, right? This is heavy stuff, and this may seem like a weird thing to talk about on Mother's Day, a day already fraught with so many complexities and emotions. But that's the thing about the invisible labor that moms of any gender do for their families. It often is invisible. And sometimes, just naming it or having someone from the pulpit name it can be so empowering and validating. Are you carrying an unfair portion of the mental load or doing the majority of the emotional labor for your family? Are you exhausted and just want someone else to own some of this? Or perhaps you are close to someone who is struggling with this dynamic, and maybe you didn't even realize until right now how taken for granted they feel. Or maybe you are someone who benefits from the invisible labor of others, and maybe you're just now realizing it for the first time. It doesn't have to be this way, because this unbalanced, unhealthy dynamic is tied to white supremacy culture and patriarchy, and that means that working to overcome it is work for all of us to do, no matter our gender, no matter our relationship configuration. Indeed, It is anti-oppression work, which, after all, is very much in line with the original Mother's Day. May it be so. May we make it so.